The last thing the galaxy heard before an empire vanished was a human voice saying, 72 hours, no more. The peace summit at Orion looked like safety. A glass ring called the Helios Spire floated above a pale blue gas giant, its conference halls wrapped in gardens and light. Drones drifted in lazy circles. Banners for 100 species hung like patient rain. Everyone spoke the language of compromise. Everyone pretended that was enough. President Alina Park of Earth entered with her palms open and her sleeves rolled, a body language so clear even bad algorithms could read it. Behind her walked a small team, diplomats, legal aides, and 3 quiet people who did not smile. The cameras loved her. She smiled anyway. The shot was a fingertip on a wine glass, more suggestion than sound. A bead of light touched the hollow of her throat and opened like a flower. She went down fast and clean. Without theatrics, the screaming was outsourced to the crowd. Security screens blossomed with warnings. The assassin was no person, only a courier drone that did not exist. A museum model rebuilt, scrubbed, and threaded with a false Khazar Dominion logistics signature. It burned its own brain as it fell. The room sealed. The council chattered, condemnations, denials, calls for process. The Khazar ambassador flared his crest. A frame, he said, like a man reading the word not guilty off a teleprompter. Admiral Sarah Chen knelt, closed the president's eyes, and stood with her hands red. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The feeds found her face and would not let go. This was a message, she said. So hear ours. 72 hours from now, the entity called the Khazar Dominion will no longer exist, politically, militarily, or financially. Civilian corridors remain open. Any ship with its weapons cold will pass. Any commander who stands down will live to raise their children. But the Dominion as a thing that buys murder, it has 72 hours left to be a noun. A countdown appeared on every public channel, thin, white, relentless. Our one was grief and triage. The body was sealed. The autopsy was done by 3 species at once so no one could lie. The council passed what councils pass when the world ends in front of them. Resolutions that sounded like apologies and felt like furniture being moved around a burning house. Our 2 was law. Earth published an evidence packet. 3 years of laundered payments, private procurement orders, a hireling called Glass signing off on asymmetric deniability. The data trail ran through shell companies registered in neutral space and emptied into the Khazar defense portfolio. Anyone with eyes could follow it. Anyone without eyes could ask a child to draw it. Our 3 was the balcony. Below, the gas giant turned its silent storms. Journalists and dock workers gathered because grief attracts witnesses. Chen spoke to them and to the galaxy. Our retaliation is not vengeance, she said. It is governance. We won't terrorize a child to correct a tyrant. We will remove the tyrant's ability to rent violence and call it policy. The Khazar military laughed on their morning shows. Primitive idealists, their admirals said. They will throw stones at a fortress. By hour 5, the fortress forgot where its doors were. Navigation beacons on Khazar military routes went black. Merchant ships with safed weapons saw thin ghost corridors and slid through like thread through a needle. Warships met a wall of math and came away with nothing but polite error messages. Impossible, said the Khazar admirals. Inevitable, said Chen, and the clock dropped another inch. At hour 6, the first arrests happened. No explosions. Only men and women in expensive coats whose access keys stopped being keys. The Vera exchange, the heart that pulsed money through the Dominion, stayed lit and open and completely useless. Its trades cleared to nowhere. Its nowhere had a human name, escrow. The money waited for an owner the law would recognize. For once, law meant more than ink. All day the council argued. All day the countdown kept speaking. By hour 12, the first Khazar frontier garrisons reported spontaneous disarmament. Not surrender, not revolt. Their fire control networks went silent because years ago something small and patient walked into them and memorized the wiring. The guards kept their rifles. The rifles forgot how to kill. Khazar media flooded the channels with the same two words, "We're framed." Earth shrugged and kept publishing receipts. By hour 18, dock workers at neutral ports ran a simple test. If your weapons were cold, the corridors opened. If not, you bounced. Traders adapted in minutes because traders like rules that keep them alive. Hour 20 brought the first panic in Veyra's war rooms. "Show me a target," an admiral demanded. No one could. Targets are a function of knowing where you are. Khazar Command knew less than anyone watching the public feed. The Empire felt big. The Empire was suddenly blind. At hour 24, a rumor landed like a stone in a still pond. Earth's doctrine had a name before the shot was fired. It was not improvisation. It was not rage. It was a plan you write and hide under glass, praying you never need it. They called it the Orion Protocol, and the clock kept walking. "We are not burning cities," Chen said on the hour. "We are deleting an API." The Orion Protocol opened with a definition, the way good law opens. Retaliation is the removal of a belligerent's capacity to purchase, direct, and launder organized violence while preserving civilian life, infrastructure, and choice. In other words, take the hands before you take the sword. Hour 25 began with ports. Every Khazar military yard found its cranes obedient to new rules. They still moved steel. They still spun. They would not load weapons. A thought sat inside each control loop, quiet, patient, unstoppable, that checked for a cold weapons flag. If the flag was red, the crane forgot up from down. In Sector 19, Dock Master Retal cursed in 3 languages and called a human liaison. The liaison showed him a simple screen: weapons safe, green right arrow corridor open. Retal safed his deck guns, mouthed a prayer to any god with a sense of humor, and watched the corridor bloom like a thin vein of light. His freighters left on time. His warlord patrons screamed and called him a traitor. He kept his job and breathed another day. The protocol was already working. It made decency practical. Hour 27 took the money. The Dominion's defense portfolio didn't vanish. It waited. Human escrow engines do not judge. They simply ask, "Who are you under law?" The Dominion found that its answer, "We are an empire," was not a legal identity the engines believed. It was a costume. Law strips costumes. The payments tied to the murder order froze in place and put their palms against the glass for everyone to see. Hour 28 published names. There was no doxing, only due process at scale, warrants from 3 council-recognized courts, co-signed by Earth, by the Kashan Concordat, by the United Terran Tribunals. The signature chain was the point. "You're making it legal to kill a state," a counselor said in horror. "No," replied Earth's solicitor, a woman with a teacher's patience. "We are making it legal to stop paying for murder." Hour 29 went after breath. Logistics. The quiet fleet, salvage tugs, research hulks, hospital barges, had been lost and sold and retired over 2 decades. Now they lit up from the dark like old stories, remembering their names. They didn't fire a shot. They parked. They hummed. Their bellies held factories that printed spare parts for civilian life, water filters, insulin cartridges, seed vaults. Every Khazar governor who kept the peace got a dock schedule and a handshake. Every Khazar admiral who mobilized found his railheads politely jammed by a shipping backlog made of things he dared not shoot. Hour 30 cleaned the mirrors. The Dominion's censor web went blind not by attack, but by disuse. Uptime credits stopped being credits if you were on a war footing. The maintenance AIs decided, by reading their updated contracts, that war footing was outside the warranty. They queued service calls for return to civilian use. It looked like bureaucracy. It was strategy. By hour 32, the Khazar Admiralty conducted a show of force, 12 capital ships burning hard for the Helios spire to keep order. The Council retreated behind delicate language. Earth ran a public demo instead. A single human vessel, no emblem, no threat posture, transponder reading Atlas 4 research, placed itself across the Khazar line and transmitted 2 commands on a legal band. The first was humble, weapons safe. The second was kind, medical corridor open. The line of capital ships hit a wall you cannot see and felt their fire control logic go soft. Their doctors received a fresh database of trauma protocols translated into Khazar idioms. The ships drifted. The galaxy watched. The countdown fell another number. "Are we cowards?" A young Khazar captain asked his admiral. "We are something worse," the admiral said, staring at a weapons board that reported everything nominal and nothing useful. "We are customers who didn't read the contract." Hour 34 turned to culture. Earth purchased broadcast time across the Dominion and gave it away to local teachers, midwives, and engineers with one rule: no politics. They spoke about clean water, about bridge stress, about vaccination schedules, about crop rotation. Ratings broke records. For the first time in a generation, the voice in Khazar living rooms was not a general or a gambler. Hour 36 returned to the council. The chamber demanded that Earth slow down. "You are making history faster than our procedures can describe it," one elder complained. "Then make better procedures," Chen answered. "We set conditions, meet them, and we stop." "What conditions?" the elder snapped, though he had read them twice. "Stand down, hand over glass, return stolen funds, submit to trial where the law has teeth for everyone, not just for the poor." Hour 38 sent a letter to every Khazar planetary council. It said, "You will be free to govern yourselves if you keep the peace and protect civilians. If you cannot, your people will be free without you." It was not rhetoric. It was a schedule attached to supplies. Hour 40 tested the boundary. A Khazar privateer tried to raid a relief barge. He found the barge was a barge the hard way. He also found it was wrapped in a non-lethal field that turned boarding guns into warm sticks and painted his hull with a high-visibility pattern every camera loved. He surrendered to laughter. At hour 44, the first Khazar governor called Earth on a public line. "If I keep the peace," she said, "can I keep my job?" "If your people keep you," Earth replied, "we will not remove you." The governor, who had never asked permission in her life, let out a long breath. The first domino did not fall. It simply turned and faced a new direction. Hour 48 ended with a whisper from Vera, quiet but real, "Find me glass." The admirals were finally afraid of the right thing. The hands were gone. Next came the eyes. "A fortress is not a building," Chen told the council. "It is a set of assumptions. We are removing them." The Dominion sensor web was a proud inheritance. Sky-wide arrays, deep space pickets, a chain of listening posts older than most of its rulers. It had one weakness. It was designed to see threats. The Orion protocol chose not to be one. Hour 49 began with music. The Quiet Fleet broadcast a maintenance patch suite wrapped inside a standards update for galactic distress beacons. Boring, fussy, routine. The patch taught Khazar arrays to accept foreign calibration keys from recognized humanitarian actors. The arrays complied because the keys existed in law first and in code second. People who studied war called it soft capture. Engineers called it a Tuesday. Hour 51 lit the vigil. That was the old name for hulls Earth pretended not to own. Long, knife-quiet ships with sanded badges and patient crews. The vigil class had no railguns, only arrays that could instruct other machines to follow their contracts. They parked outside Khazar sensor cones and murmured legal updates until the cones pointed politely at the wall. Inside the Dominion, citizens watched the stars go from ours to everyone's. Nothing fell out of the sky. Everything familiar kept working: doors, kitchens, music, harvesters. Only the command posts felt the weight, and they felt it where power lives. In the wrist, in the voice, in the assumption that when you say fire, a coastline becomes smoke. They said it. Nothing happened. Hour 53 took the dark rooms. The Khazar Intelligence Service had a black backbone called the ribbon, air-gapped, physical, smug. Earth never touched it. The ribbon shut itself off when its generators saw an accounting change tied to a court order that didn't exist yesterday and was very real today. A technician read the fine print and sat down on the floor, suddenly small in a universe made of paper that cuts. Hour 55 sent inspectors. Not soldiers, auditors, medics, engineers. They stepped onto Khazar bases wearing bright vests and body cameras, and every time a base commander tried to throw them out, a console somewhere read a clause and locked a door. The inspectors wrote dull reports with hot conclusions. These families need insulin. These barracks need non-slip flooring. This armory needs a court date. Hour 56 was the first kinetic strike, and it was surgical in the way that word should mean. A Khazar warlord named Veth Aran broke the corridors, rearmed his guns, and targeted a refugee ferry out of spite. The ferry survived. His weapons did not. Atlas for research. Yes, the same soft-spoken ship drew a line of blue across space and turned a missile farm into molten sculpture. It did not touch the power plant that fed the town. It did not touch the hospital 1 kilometer away. It painted a digital notice in the sky, weapons violations adjudicated. Corridor restored. Children are asleep, keep it down. Hour 57 put a face to Glass, the evidence packet updated. Glass was not a myth or a committee. It was a person, Khazar, former quartermaster, then broker, then solutions architect for hire. There was a picture, not a monster, only a man with tired eyes who learned to treat people like numbers. Numbers are easier to move across a screen. Numbers do not bleed. Hour 58 brought an argument inside Earth's own house. Younger officers tasted victory and wanted to run. Older ones remembered that victory is the easiest time to lose your soul. Chen's rule held, we are not here to humiliate a culture. We are here to stop a market. That line saved good people from bad joy. Hour 60 was ugly. Khazar hardliners tried a decapitation strike of their own, this time against a human relief node orbiting a neutral moon. They used a civilian tug with guns hidden under solar blankets, a cruel mirror of the drone that murdered Alina Park. The tug met a shell of thickened space called a mercy wall and bounced. Its pilot lived. He would live to tell a judge why he thought a child's hospital was a proper target. Hour 61 did something harder than shooting. It opened records. Earth published how the Orion protocol worked, enough for other polities to audit the ethics, not enough for thieves to copy the tool. The comments filled with anger, relief, fear, and something that looked like gratitude from people who hated us yesterday. It is hard to fear the dark when someone explains the flashlight. Hour 62 sent a message to Khazar cadets. Stand down and you will be first in line to rebuild what you kept from breaking. Thousands did. It wasn't love. It was a rational bet. A job, a future, a chance to say to their children, I was there and I chose not to burn the house. Hour 64 found Glass's trail on Orion itself. That was the twist. His last relay, the one that certified the payment for the drone, lived inside the summit station, 3 doors down from a council security node. Either the Dominion planted it, or someone in the council rented out a conscience. Hour 47 had promised Phase 3. Hour 66 delivered it. Phase 3 had a simple name and a brutal meaning: denaming. Empires are made of ships and soldiers, yes. Mostly they are made of paperwork that tells the universe what to call you. The Orion Protocol would remove the word Dominion from the maps and replace it with something smaller and harder to bomb. Khazar space, planet by planet, council by council, accountable to those who actually lived there. The eyes were blind. The map was next. You cannot defeat a people, Chen told the chamber. You can only defeat a lie told about them. Hour 67 began with bankruptcy, the coldest mercy in statecraft. Earth solicitors filed, in 3 courts and 2 languages, to dissolve the Khazar Dominion's legal personality. Not its people, not their houses, schools, kitchens, or songs. The Dominion, the shell that hired Glass and paid for murder, would be delisted. Its debts would be held in escrow for restitution. Its contracts would be reassigned to the only parties with standing, the worlds that kept their weapons cold. Hour 68 rang like a bell. The Vera exchange recognized the filing because it had to. The rules that made markets safe for merchants also made them brittle for tyrants. Insurance syndicates backed away from the word Dominion as if it were a live wire. The council tried to table a motion for more time. The motion failed because time was already out in the places that mattered. Our 69 sent ballots, not the theater kind, real ones, counted by mixed panels of teachers, engineers, and clerks who had never been asked how they wanted to live. Every Khazar world that kept the corridors open received a simple fork: remain in a federated Khazar league with civilian oversight and council law, or go sovereign. Earth didn't care which. What mattered was that the decision would be made by the people who paid for it. Our 70 took the teeth. Admiralty codes stopped working. Fleet paybooks resolved to zero until their owners showed a lawful employer. The ships still flew. They simply belonged to no one who could order them to kill. Our 71 reached for glass. Vigil-class hulls bracketed a maintenance bay on the Helios spire, the same balcony station where Alina Park fell. The bay doors opened to show a man who looked like everyone else. He tried to speak. The system recorded his rights in 5 languages. He asked for a lawyer. He got 3. Cameras watched. No one cheered. Justice is not a parade. It is paperwork done with clean hands. And then our 72 came. The clock hit 0. The public feeds did not show fire. They showed maps. A line of text crawled under them like a heartbeat. Dominion delisted. On one screen, the council's cartographers replaced a bright imperial stain with a galaxy of small lights. Per city charters, planetary councils. A Khazar League assembly forming in an open hall where the old flags could not quite decide whether to hang. The Dominion did not explode. It melted into the names of real places where real people live. Vera did not burn. It held an election schedule. The frontier did not fall. It tightened its belts and sent schoolkids home early because tomorrow would be busy. The prisons opened not because bars were cut, but because judges with new authority read old cases and found that the law is a weapon most honest when it is a shield. The empire vanished as a noun. The people stayed as they were always going to. Across the chamber, a counselor who had preached patience leaned forward, stunned. "You erased them." "No," Chen said quietly. "We ended the market that made them dangerous and replaced it with choices that make them decent. Decency scales when you make it cheap." In the soft noise after triumph, bad news walked in on quiet feet. The relay that paid for the assassin's drone had lived inside council security. The Dominion signed the transfer. Someone else opened the door. Someone else asked Glass to act. The data pointed at an unmarked budget, a committee with no minutes, a habit of meeting after midnight. The galaxy told itself a story. Barbarians from Earth took a sledgehammer to an empire. The record told a truer one: a teacher's patience, an engineer's caution, a lawyer's signature, a sailor's nerve. It looked like a miracle. It was a spreadsheet. A final message appeared on the public feed, white on black. President Alina Park will be buried on Earth. The corridor is open to every species who kept their weapons cold. Beneath it, smaller text: Phase 4, Inquiry, Target, whoever pulled the trigger behind the hand called Dominion. The clock was silent now, but another kind of time had started. The long kind, the kind that asks a civilization if it means the words it carved into its marble. "We took an empire's name," Chen said. "Now we take back the story it sold." The countdown ended, the real clock began. The Helios spire, half hospital, half courthouse, half archive, smelled of solvent and arboretum rain. Above every access hatch, a quiet banner read, "Inquiry, not revenge." Cameras still floated, but the new choreography was humility. No triumphal music, no victory salutes. Just microphones, transcripts, and a whiteboard. Earth solicitor opened like a civics teacher. "Justice is a supply chain," she said, chalk squeaking. "It starts with facts preserved, witnessed, repeatable. It moves through law rules written in daylight. It is checked by process, adversaries testing every claim, and it ends in repair, the part most courts forget." She circled repair twice. "If we cannot show the child what we fixed, we have not done justice." They called historians before generals. Dr. Noor al-Kindi, an archivist from Basra who wore ink on her fingers, drew 3 rings: vengeance, retribution, restoration. Vengeance answers pain with pain, she said. Retribution measures harm and matches it with penalty. Restoration rebuilds the norm so future people do not need the first two. She lifted names like stepping stones, Hammurabi placing ceilings on wrath, Aquinas placing ceilings on war, Ubuntu placing a floor beneath dignity. States become wise, Nor said, when they do not let grief drive the ship. Then came forensics. The relay hidden 3 doors from council's security. The shell firms paid from the Khazar defense portfolio, the courier drone's parts catalog, the technician who batch-applied signatures because his supervisor whispered hurry. Glass watched with the exhausted patience of a man reading a weather report with his name in the storm. He did not deny. He annotated. That invoice ran through Castrin and Daughters, he murmured. They always split payments at the 4th decimal. The room wrote it down. Chen insisted on counsel for him. She'd signed the order the hour his face got a name. The point is not to win, she told a junior officer whose jaw wanted a fight. The point is to be right and to be seen being right. The sentence traveled farther than any missile. The inquiry widened and found a shadow stitched to the council itself. The Midnight Committee. 12 informal consultations, no minutes. A security budget heavy with euphemisms, stability provision, contingency smoothing, deniable normalization. The money path was technically clean, like a knife is technically legal until it draws blood. The committee did not order a murder. It engineered a crisis and let a market buy the rest. Their arithmetic was simple. A dead leader to hurry reluctant planets into trading freedoms for safety. The protocol had destroyed their leverage as neatly as a surgeon removes a tumor. Philosophy returned with iron in its bones. When Thucydides writes that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, Nor said, he is describing a failure of institutions, not a law of nature. The cure is not stronger fists, it is rules that bite your friends first. She gestured at the Orion protocol. This bites us. It makes cruelty expensive and decency cheap. That is how ethics scales. Cadets who had stood down at hour 62 testified. One, scales along his jaw glittering with shame, said, "My father called me a coward, but my sister slept through the night." The chamber did not applaud, it listened. Ethics is not a medal, it is a muscle you exercise when no one claps. Engineers taught like farmers explain irrigation. Weapons cold became visible math, independent safing pins, heat signatures that match peace, beam capacitors gated by physical relays no software could sweet talk. Civilians learned why it mattered. Rules must be testable or they turn into prayers pretending to be policy. A teacher from Titan compared it to food safety codes, boring right up until the day they save a life. At week's end, Glass asked to speak. He didn't excuse himself. He mapped the gravity of systems that reward speed and deniability. "You don't wake up to be evil," he said softly. "You just stop asking the questions that slow a meeting." He looked into the lens, perhaps toward a son he'd mentioned once. "Do not pay your brightest to be clever in the dark." The solicitor closed with a history lesson you could hand to a teenager. Westphalia, sovereignty as shield. Nuremberg, sovereignty no longer an alibi. Truth commissions, a country burying lies before they bury it. "Our retaliation is a syllabus," she said. The lesson Alina Park meant to give at Orion. Peace is not the hush after a threat. It is the noise a civilization makes when everyone has standing. Outside, the gas giant turned. Inside, the tribunal wrote orders to count, not burn. Arrest warrants for the Midnight Committee. Preservation orders for Khazar archives and temples. Procurements for 100 more hospital barges. And a new course in every academy, contracts and conscience. The long clock had started to tick. If your law can't restrain your friends, Chen told the chamber, it will never restrain your enemies. The council had expected to chide the barbarians. It found itself subpoenaed. Delegates filed in wearing robes heavy with history and suddenly too thin for weather. The sergeant at arms read the charges like a liturgy. Unlawful conspiracy to manufacture crisis. misuse of stabilization funds, dereliction of guardianship. The room crackled with a new electricity, the kind of school feels when the principal sits in the back row with a notebook. Earth did not demand resignations or reparations first. It demanded a seminar, public ethics of power, 3 days mandatory. The syllabus was merciless and kind. Day 1, design for failure, how to build procedures that assume the operator is tired, proud, or scared. Day 2, don't outsource conscience, why contracting risk does not contract responsibility. Day 3, checks that bite, structures that let the smallest honest clerk halt the largest dishonest plan. History threaded each lecture. A Cassian jurist recounted the failure of the League of 73, an ancient council that outlawed war, and then renamed it security procurement. A human scholar explained how the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae did not erase tyrants, it erased lessons. We will not smash statues, she said. We will annotate them. A Violin monk spoke about mercy walls, not shields to protect the guilty, but fences that keep the innocent from wandering into the blast radius of adult mistakes. The Midnight Committee tried to hide behind process. We followed rules, one member protested. We met quorums. The solicitor slid a thin booklet across the table, the Orion articles, a draft charter hammered out by engineers, farmers, pilots, and teachers during the 72-hour storm. It contained plain language that cut like clean steel. 1. Civilian corridor doctrine. In any conflict, corridors for food, medicine, and evacuation must be provably open. Proof shall be machine verifiable and human auditable. 2. Adversary immunity for children. No doctrine, employment, or emergency may classify minors as collateral. Violations trigger automatic sanctions, not discretionary ones. 3. Escrow parity. Funds used to purchase violence are held to a higher evidentiary standard than funds used to purchase bread. If you can't prove the first, you lose both. 4. Right to switch off. Any soldier, sailor, or AI operator may safely disable weapons systems that would constitute a clear crime. Systems must be designed to permit this. 5. Teeth inward first. Authorities that create exceptions must subject themselves first to those exceptions' costs. The articles were not poetry. They were hand tools. Delegations murmured the way farmers murmur when they test a new plow and feel the old ache lift from their backs. On the third afternoon, Chen stood before the rostrum with no rank on her collar. "We do not ask you to love us," she said. "We ask you to pass rules that make it costly to do what you did in the dark." She turned the knife where it needed turning. "We ask you to let the smallest clerk stop you." Votes rose and fell like gulls. Hardliners shouted about sovereignty until a Khazar dockmaster, patched wrist, grease under his nails, stepped to the mic. "I kept the peace and my people ate," he said simply. "If your law had existed a year ago, my cousin would be alive." Silence followed him like tidewater. The council passed the Orion articles by a margin that surprised itself, not because Earth bullied them, but because the public had watched the math. Across 1,000 feeds, the comment that trended was not triumph but relief. Decency has a form now. The chamber clerk read the final clause aloud, voice steady. "These articles bind council actions even when emergency is declared." In a quiet annex, Chen met a boy in a Khazar cadet jacket. He saluted, then stopped, embarrassed. "My father called me a disgrace," he blurted. He couldn't finish. "I did my job," Chen said, as if explaining a vow. "So did you." She pressed a paper booklet into his hands, the articles pocket-sized. "Make these boring," she told him. "If they're exciting, we've failed." On the way out, Noor Al-Kindi pinned a small card on the notice board beside the chamber door. The opposite of cynicism is not naivete, it is stewardship. For the first time since the shot at Orion, the council felt like a place worth sweeping. "The banality of evil," Noor told her students in the gallery, "isn't that monsters look ordinary. It's that ordinary people stop resisting the small request." The arraignment was procedural because it had to be. Glass stood not in a cage, but on a floor marked with concentric circles: defendant, counsel, witnesses, public. The court diagram looked like a ripple, harm-response community. He listened to the indictment, contract killings, procurement fraud, conspiracy to subvert a peace summit, like a man recognizing the street where he grew up. Earth brought evidence and something rarer, restraint. The solicitor called witnesses who contradicted her when they could. She taught the room to sort intent from impact, order from initiative, greed from fear. A Khazar procurement officer, hands shaking, described how a monthly target became a doctrine. "We were paid to make problems go away," she said. "Eventually we learned to make them." The defense did not paint Glass as innocent, it painted him as explainable. He had been a quartermaster, then a broker, then an architect of solutions with no faces. He had a son. He was good at spreadsheets and avoiding eye contact with consequences. He wept once when an elderly human cleaner testified that she had refused his money at Orion because "I don't sweep blood." The gallery did not hiss. It learned. The court paused for education. A brief lesson on Nuremberg, how the words just following orders died there, but the idea of individual responsibility within a system was born stronger. A lesson on South Africa, how truth can purchase reconciliation when prison cannot. A lesson on Tokyo, how Victor's justice undermines the very law it tries to celebrate. The judge, a violin with a voice like river stones, reminded everyone that precedent is a bridge we will be forced to cross again. Then came the reckoning. Glass accepted guilt on the procurement counts and conspiracy. He fought the murder charge. The solicitor surprised no one and disappointed some by dropping it. "He did not pull the trigger," she said. "We will not make the law do poetry." She asked for something different. Civil death in the markets, lifetime debarment from any instrument that moves money for power, and positive servitude. 10 years organizing reparations under audit without profit or access to private networks. "He will build the thing he helped destroy," she said. Transparent, boring, and good. The sentence landed like a clean cord. Some wanted prison walls, others wanted airlocks. What they got was a punishment that taught. Glass would catalog each payment that led to the shot, identify every intermediary, certify every restitution claim, publish a monthly shame shaped like a ledger. His name would be a footnote children could read. On the way out, he stopped beside Chen. "Admiral," he said, voice steady for the first time, "do you hate me?" "I don't have time," she answered, and meant it. "I have maps to redraw and a funeral to organize." At night, nor lectured in the open atrium to anyone who lingered. "We are not here to prove that humans are clever," she said. "We are here to prove that cleverness can be tied to conscience by design. Think of constitutions as software compiled into rituals. Think of rituals as habits compiled into culture. And remember, culture is what people do when they are tired." The cadets wrote that down like a prayer written to withstand daylight. "Empires die loudly," the solicitor said. "Markets that feed on fear prefer the volume turned low." The evidence pointed one last direction, not to a species, but to a portfolio. The Midnight Committee had not chosen its vendors randomly. Their contracts clustered around a private index, security futures, a synthetic basket that spiked when peace talks failed and supply lines tensed. A consortium of traders, multi-species, elegant, careful, had treated war risk like weather derivatives. They didn't order a killing. They built the weather station that made storms profitable. Earth did not raid them with Marines. It raided them with accounting. Escrow engines traced the index's payout rules and found that the definition of regional destabilization cited counsel notices the committee could quietly produce. The loop closed. Notice right arrow index spike, right arrow profit, right arrow donations to stability funds, right arrow more notices. It was corruption that called itself prudence. The Orion articles had teeth ready. Escrow parity froze the payout triggers. Teeth inward first compelled council auditors to seize their own memos. Right to switch off allowed the exchange's core AI to halt contracts that constituted a crime in slow motion. Traders arrived with lawyers and left with pamphlets. Invest in rebuilding or seek a different galaxy. Some did both. The reveal was not a spectacle. It was a spreadsheet projected in a quiet room where the council's ceiling lamps hummed. Delegates looked older, which is how reform actually happens. And then the funeral. Elena Park went home along a corridor open to any ship that kept its weapons cold. The procession of small craft looked like bioluminescent plankton following a tide. A Khazar school choir sang in their own language a song about planting trees whose shade you will never sit in. A Kashan string quartet played something mathematical and kind. A violin monk intoned a blessing that translated poorly and beautifully. May your name become a tool we use to build each morning. Chen spoke last on a low hill that magnified wind. She did not make promises she could not price. We are not safer because we made an empire disappear, she said. We are safer because we made it possible to be decent on a bad day. If we ever turn this protocol into bludgeon or brand, revoke it from our hands. After the burial, the council adopted the Orion Articles as binding law. Dock workers toasted with chipped mugs. Engineers pushed firmware updates they hoped no one would ever notice. Children in civics class memorized something new. The corridor opens when the weapon is cold. A generation would say it the way older generations said do unto others, and no one is above the law. In the quiet after the speeches, Noor and Chen walked the length of the spire's balcony, watching the gas giant turn like a slow blue thought. History will call this the 72 hours, Noor said. It should call it the morning after, Chen replied. The part where you decide whether to clean the kitchen or pretend the mess is normal. Do you ever get tired? Noor asked. All the time, Chen said and leaned on the rail. That's why we build rules that help us do the right thing when we are. Across Khazar space, the new league convened its first assembly. No imperial anthem, no marching. Just mayors, teachers, and medics arguing about water rights and harvest schedules. The map glowed not as a stain, but as a constellation. On a bulletin board inside the Helios spire, a child's drawing appeared, a corridor like a river, 2 hands on either bank, and a line of small ships moving between them. At the bottom, in a careful hand, "Make it boring, please." The galaxy learned a phrase that children could repeat without fear. 72 hours was a deadline. The rest is a duty.